Your dead father didn't just leave you a house in his will. He left you a horrifying secret buried beneath it. And now your greedy brother is ready to unleash whatever he truly built in the basement. The air in the sterile lawyer's office was thick enough to choke on. I could practically taste the dust motes dancing in the single weak shaft of afternoon sunlight cutting across the mahogany table. Across from me, perched like a vulture on a fence post, sat my older brother, Michael. He was impeccably dressed, as always, a bespoke suit that probably cost more than my entire savings account. And then there was Mr. Henderson, the family solicitor, looking as tired as I felt, his glasses perpetually slipping down his nose. It was the reading of Dad's will, a formality, I'd thought. A final goodbye to the man who raised us, who built the life we both now stood to inherit pieces of. Dad had been gone 3 months. A sudden heart attack while tending his prize-winning roses. A shock to us all, but mostly to me, because I'd been the one there, the one who found him. Michael, naturally, had been too busy in the city to fly down until the funeral. Now, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, adjusting the thick sheaf of papers. We moved to the primary assets, specifically the estate, which includes the primary residence at 42 Willow Creek Lane. My heart gave a hopeful little skip. Willow Creek Lane. That house was my entire childhood. The scent of pine needles in the garage, the uneven floorboard on the landing, the oak tree in the backyard where Dad helped me carve my initials. I'd already mentally planned how I'd renovate the kitchen. I was 28, finally stable in my career, and ready to put down roots near where I grew up. Michael didn't even twitch. He just steepled his fingers, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. He'd always assumed he'd get the house. He was the eldest, the successful one, the one Dad always relied on for big-picture advice. I, meanwhile, was the quiet one, the one who stayed local, the one who spent weekends fixing Dad's leaky gutters instead of closing million-dollar deals. Mr. Henderson scanned the document, his voice droning on with legalese until he finally reached the crucial passage. And therefore, pursuant to my final instructions, the entirety of the property located at 42 Willow Creek Lane, including all outbuildings and acreage, is bequeathed to my son, Michael James Peterson. The world tilted. The sunlight seemed to vanish. I blinked, sure I hadn't heard him correctly. I looked at Michael, expecting him to look shocked, perhaps even slightly uncomfortable at my inevitable reaction. Instead, he simply nodded once, a curt acknowledgement of his victory. I leaned forward, my knuckles white where they gripped the edge of the table. "Excuse me, Mr. Henderson, could you read that last part again?" The lawyer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Son, it's quite clear. Michael inherits the house." No, that can't be right. Dad promised me. He said he wanted me to have the house. He said I cared about it more than anyone." My voice was rising, cracking with disbelief. "Michael hasn't lived there in 15 years. He only visits for Christmas if he has nothing better to do." Michael finally spoke, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Ethan, Dad, and I had a long discussion about this recently. I'm the one who can maintain the property properly. You need cash, Ethan. I need an asset." "You needed cash, Michael. You lost that startup last year. Don't pretend you're doing this out of stewardship." I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing loudly in the small room. How could Dad give my house to my brother?" My outburst hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Michael didn't flinch. He merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, conveying a mixture of pity and irritation. Mr. Henderson, however, looked genuinely uncomfortable, shuffling the papers as if they might spontaneously combust. "Ethan, please. Mr. Henderson said, trying to regain control. "The terms are binding. Your father was very specific and, frankly, quite emotional during the final codicil signing. There is no room for negotiation." "Emotional?" I scoffed, standing up so abruptly my chair scraped back on the hardwood floor. Dad wasn't emotional about property. He was emotional about his damn garden gnomes. He loved that house. He told me I was getting it. "Perhaps you misunderstood him, Ethan," Michael interjected coolly, leaning back in his chair, crossing one perfectly tailored leg over the other. "Dad often spoke hypothetically. You always ran with the fantasy." That stung deeper than the legal wording, the implication that I was some deluded child clinging to fairy tales. I turned back to the lawyer, desperation starting to claw at my throat. "Mr. Henderson, you were there when Dad wrote his first will, years ago. I remember him talking about it then. Did he change the main beneficiary? Was there a recent change? Because if he was coerced, or if he wasn't in his right mind—" Mr. Henderson held up a placating hand. "Ethan, your father was sharp as a tack until the very end. He signed this codicil 6 weeks before he passed. He was adamant. He even stipulated that you would receive the contents of the shed, tools, old lawn mower, the rusty barbecue pit, as your bequest concerning the grounds." The shed. That was my consolation prize? My inheritance was the accumulated junk Dad never had the heart to throw away? The shed? My voice was dangerously quiet now, the anger turning into a cold, heavy dread. The shed where he kept all his old tax documents, the old filing cabinets. "Yes," the lawyer confirmed, glancing at Michael, who seemed to be enjoying this show immensely, "and a substantial portfolio of blue-chip stocks, which are being transferred into Michael's name alongside the deed." That explained Michael's composure. He wasn't just getting the sentimental property. He was getting Dad's tangible wealth. I was left with... what? The house wasn't the only thing Dad owned of value. There were investments, but the will stated I got the shed contents. "Wait a minute," I said, my mind racing, trying to connect the dots. Dad had been meticulously organized, especially financially. Why would he suddenly hand over the entire house and liquid assets to Michael while assigning me a glorified junk heap? What about the insurance policies, the life insurance? Michael actually laughed, a short, dry sound. "Ethan, you're being tedious. You know that was always designated for the estate taxes, which are substantial given the value of Willow Creek. It all balances out." "Does it, Michael? Because Dad wasn't stupid. He wouldn't liquidate his savings to cover taxes if he left you the primary appreciating asset." I stared hard at Michael, searching for the lie in his eyes. He'd always been the better actor. "It's done, Ethan. Accept it." Michael stood up, smoothing down his jacket. He looked down at me, the victor addressing the vanquished. "I'll have the movers start next week. I want the place empty by the end of the month." I felt a profound sense of injustice, a deep, churning conviction that this was wrong. Dad wouldn't do this unless he was under extreme duress or unless there was a secret I didn't know about. The shed, the tools, the filing cabinets. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice regaining some of its previous strength, "I need to see the contents of that shed immediately. If the will leaves me the shed and everything in it, I intend to catalog every single item before Michael touches a thing." Mr. Henderson looked resigned. "Fine, Ethan, but I doubt you'll find anything substantive. It's just old tools." 20 minutes later, I was standing inside the dusty, cobweb-draped confines of the shed. Michael had refused to come in, claiming the smell of mildew offended his sensibilities. I pulled open the rusted metal latch on the largest filing cabinet, the one Dad always kept locked. The lock was cheap. It had probably rusted open years ago. The top drawer was full of receipts and defunct warranty cards. The second drawer held old photo albums. The third drawer, however, contained a single crisp manila envelope tucked beneath a pile of yellowed blueprints for a deck Dad never built. I pulled it out. It was addressed to me in Dad's familiar, slightly shaky script. For Ethan, to be opened only if Michael inherits the house. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tear the flap open. Inside, there wasn't a letter, but a folded sheet of heavy, official-looking paper. I unfolded it. It was a certified document stamped and notarized, dated 1 week after the codicil was signed, giving Michael the house. It was a notarized power of attorney granting me immediate, irrevocable control over a separate holding account Dad maintained. And then I saw the account number, followed by a staggering figure in the current balance column, a figure that dwarfed the value of the entire Willow Creek property. But what truly made my blood run cold was the small, handwritten note scrawled beneath the signature block, addressed to me, but clearly intended for anyone reading it. Ethan, if Michael has the house, it means I failed to convince him. He took the lie. Now, you must take the truth. Burn this document and liquidate the funds immediately. Michael is not who you think he is. He never was. Call Amelia Thorne. She knows why I did this, but whatever you do, don't let Michael find out you have this because he already started looking for the key. The breath hitched in my throat, tasting suddenly metallic. Michael is not who you think he is. The words burned themselves onto my retina. This wasn't about favoritism or an old man's sentimentality. This was a calculated maneuver, a preemptive strike against my brother. The sheer weight of this secret dropped into my lap amidst the smell of rust and mildew was crushing. I looked wildly around the shed. The only witness was a family of spiders weaving an intricate tapestry in the rafters. I clutched the paper, my mind cycling through every interaction I'd ever had with Michael. The loans he never repaid, the way he'd subtly undermined me in front of our extended family, the coldness behind his forced smiles. I had always dismissed it as typical older brother dominance. Now it felt sinister. I shoved the power of attorney deep into my jeans pocket, smoothing the exterior of the file cabinet as if erasing any evidence of my discovery. My gaze fell on the blueprints underneath where the envelope had been resting. They weren't for a deck. They were architectural drawings, highly detailed schematics of the foundation of 42 Willow Creek Lane, covered in cryptic notations and circled areas that looked less like structural support points and more like access hatches. "Ethan, are you done communing with the garden tools?" Michael's voice sliced through the silence from the driveway. He sounded impatient. "Almost!" I yelled back, forcing a normalcy into my tone that felt entirely alien. I grabbed a handful of Dad's old heavy-duty gardening gloves and tossed them onto the workbench, the diversionary debris. I scrambled out of the shed, pulling the door shut just as Michael strode around the corner of the house, tapping impatiently at his expensive watch. "It's about time. I have a conference call in an hour. We're done here, Ethan. Go enjoy your gardening supplies." "Sure, Michael, I just needed to grieve a little longer near the roses," I lied smoothly, adopting the mournful tone I knew he expected. I walked past him toward my car, resisting the urge to bolt. "Right. Well, try not to make a mess when you move your things out of the guest room later this week." He didn't offer a hug, a handshake, or even a sidelong glance of sympathy. He just walked straight toward the back porch, clearly intending to inspect his new domain. Once I was safely in my beat-up sedan, I pulled over 2 blocks away, parked under a dense maple tree, and pulled out the document again. Amelia Thorne. I had never heard the name before. Dad only ever spoke to his old college friends or his business contacts. Who was Amelia Thorne, and what did she know about Michael's lie? I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the dial pad, the weight of the potential fallout paralyzing me. If Dad was right, exposing Michael now, before I understood the full scope of whatever he'd done, could be catastrophic. If Michael already knew I was digging, the stakes just ratcheted up to dangerous levels. The power of attorney gave me immediate access to the funds, money that could set me up for life. But Dad's warning about burning it was terrifying. Why liquidate millions immediately unless it was to escape something? Before I could decide, my phone rang. The screen flashed an unfamiliar number, a private exchange I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Hello? The voice on the other end was low, urgent, and distinctly female. It wasn't the breathy, digitized voice of a scammer. It sounded professional, like someone used to giving orders under pressure. Is this Ethan Peterson? The voice asked without preamble. Yes. Who is this? There was a slight pause, and I could hear the faint sound of background traffic, like she was calling from a busy street corner. My name is Amelia Thorne. Your father instructed me that if he passed and Michael inherited the house, I was to contact you immediately. He didn't give me much time to prepare you, Ethan, so listen closely. You need to leave that area right now, because Michael is already here. He's not looking for the deed. He's looking for the key to the sub-level access panel behind the old wine rack in the cellar. If he finds that, he wins, and you and everything your father worked to protect will be gone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. The sub-level access panel, the cellar. I'd spent countless hours down there as a kid, helping Dad organize his dusty collection of antique wine bottles, a collection he never actually drank from. I'd always assumed the massive, custom-built oak wine rack was just decorative, bolted solidly to the back stone wall. "What are you talking about, Amelia?" I whispered into the phone, glancing nervously in my rearview mirror. Had Michael seen me leave the house? Had he followed me? What key? What sub-level? Amelia's voice sharpened, losing its professional detachment for a moment. "Ethan, there's no time for explanations. He's already been to the lawyer's office. He knows the will is executed. He's probably racing back to the house right now. He needs the key to disarm whatever is down there. If he gets to it first, whatever leverage your father had over him will be destroyed, and you will be in grave danger. Danger." The word felt cinematic, unreal, until I remembered Michael's chilling calm and the way he dismissed me so easily. "The key is on you, isn't it?" I pressed. "When Dad gave me the shed contents, he mentioned the tools. Maybe the key was hidden with something Michael thought was worthless." "No, Ethan," Amelia stressed. "He didn't hide it with you. He told me he hid it with the only person he knew. Michael would never suspect of knowing anything important. You. But he didn't give it to you. He left it in a place only you would look for, thinking Michael wouldn't bother checking there." A cold spike of realization shot through me. I looked down at the power of attorney in my hand, the document that explicitly named me as the controller of the massive hidden account, the one Dad wanted me to liquidate immediately. He wanted me to have the cash. But where was the physical key? I thought back to the shed, to the few mundane items I had taken, the rusty barbecue pit, the old lawnmower, and the gardening gloves. "The gloves?" I breathed out. "He gave me the gloves." "Check them, Ethan," Amelia urged. "He said he stitched something into the cuff of one of the gloves, a metal tag that would unlock the panel. He was worried Michael would check your pockets, but he wouldn't think you'd stop to examine the cheap leather gloves. I slammed the car into drive, tires squealing slightly as I executed a tight U-turn, heading back toward Willow Creek Lane like a man possessed. The drive felt agonizingly slow. Every red light was a personal affront. I could picture Michael now descending into the cellar, perhaps already finding the wine rack, trying to pry it open. As I pulled onto Willow Creek Lane, I saw it. Michael's sleek black sedan was parked haphazardly in the driveway of the familiar house. His driver's side door was still open, indicating a hasty arrival. I ditched my car halfway up the driveway, ignoring the possibility of confrontation. I burst through the front door, which was thankfully unlocked. Michael hadn't even bothered to secure the house he supposedly just inherited. "Michael!" I roared, sprinting through the living room, past the antique furniture I'd grown up around, toward the dining room archway that led to the kitchen and the cellar steps. The house was silent. Too silent. I rounded the corner into the dining room. Michael wasn't wrestling with the wine rack. He was standing perfectly still in the center of the room, facing the doorway to the cellar steps. His back was to me. "Took you long enough, Ethan," he said, his voice dangerously low, devoid of any prior smugness. It was flat, metallic, and utterly devoid of humanity. I skidded to a halt. In his left hand, he held a small, antique brass key. It wasn't Dad's old shed key. It was ornate, clearly meant for something specific. "Where did you get that?" I demanded, instinctively shoving my right hand deep into the pocket holding the gardening gloves, my fingers closing around the stiff, slightly sharp edge of what I now knew was the metal tag. Michael slowly turned, and my breath hitched. His expression wasn't angry. It was triumphant, yes, but overlaid with something ancient and cold. He wasn't just looking at me. He was assessing me, like a predator, assessing prey that had just walked into a trap. "You shouldn't have come back, little brother," Michael said, a genuine, terrifying smile spreading across his face. "I knew Dad left you the money, but I didn't think you'd be foolish enough to return here before you even touched a cent of it. And I certainly didn't expect him to leave you a clue pointing toward the key." He raised the brass key slightly. "But you see, Ethan, Dad didn't hide the key with you to help you. He hid it with you so that I would know exactly where to find you once I confirmed the transfer of the house. He thought he was being clever, pitting us against each other. He thought you were the smart one." Michael took a slow step toward me. "He failed to mention one crucial detail to either of us," Michael continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that chilled me to the bone. "That sub-level doesn't just hold secrets. It holds him, and he's very much awake now." The word hung between us, heavy and impossible. Him. Not the it Amelia mentioned, not an abstract piece of leverage, but a person. My father. Alive? Trapped? "What are you talking about, Michael?" I stammered, forgetting the gloves in my pocket, forgetting the millions waiting for liquidation. All that mattered was the impossibility of my brother's assertion. Michael chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that seemed too harsh for the familiar dining room. "You really thought Dad died of a heart attack tending roses, Ethan? That was phase 1 of the insurance payout, a necessary exit strategy." He gestured toward the cellar door with the brass key. "The sub-level isn't a basement, it's a reinforced containment unit. Dad wasn't just a hobbyist gardener, he was a pioneer in experimental biotechnology. Remember all those late nights he spent in the laboratory? The converted root cellar? That wasn't for hybridizing roses, Ethan. It was for keeping me out." My mind scrambled to recontextualize every memory. Dad's secrecy, His expensive, custom security system, the way he'd always insisted Michael leave immediately after visiting, citing vague work emergencies. You wanted the house because you needed to control what was under it, I realized, my voice barely a rasp. Precisely, Michael confirmed, taking another deliberate step, forcing me back toward the archway leading into the dark maw of the cellar stairs. He succeeded in making the primary asset, the house, appear to transfer cleanly to me. That was the deal. He'd leave me the asset if I agreed to keep his secret buried. But he couldn't trust me, so he left you the trail to the money and the key's location, hoping you'd be quick enough to get the funds and run before I realized he'd set a tripwire. He held up the brass key, now seeming less like an inheritance marker and more like a jailer's tool. But I always knew Dad kept one truly valuable secret, and it wasn't in the stocks. It was downstairs. I just needed the house deed to legally access the main control room without triggering the remote lockdown he installed years ago. And what if I call Amelia now? I challenged, though my fingers were already fumbling for the gardening glove, hoping the metal tag was indeed the counter key. Michael merely smirked. Amelia is my contingency plan, Ethan. She's the lawyer Dad used to manage the other funds, the ones that finance the containment system. I've already sent her an email pretending to be Dad, confirming his passing and instructing her to cease all contact with you immediately. She'll realize she's been tricked soon, but by then, it'll be too late. He pointed the key directly at my chest. Now, you have two options. You can fight me, and we both end up down there with Dad before he fully regenerates, or you can hand over the key from your glove, and I'll let you walk away with the cash. You burn the power of attorney, you disappear, and I take care of cleanup. It was the ultimate test of trust, betrayal layered upon betrayal. Michael was offering me freedom, but at the cost of leaving my father, whatever monstrous thing he had become, trapped down there with my brother. And if I used the metal tag, I might trigger a lockdown that would trap both of us with whatever was down there. My fingers found the cold, sharp edge of the tag inside the leather cuff. It wasn't just a key, it felt like a circuit breaker. I looked Michael straight in the eye, seeing not my brother, but a stranger, consumed by a dark legacy. I already know what's in the shed, Michael, I said, pulling the glove off with a practiced snap. I tossed the bulky leather glove onto the dining room rug. The small, silvery tag detached and landed with a distinctive clink right beside it. Michael's eyes immediately darted down to the tag, distracted by the tangible proof of Dad's Plan B. That was the opening. I didn't hesitate. I dove to the side, not toward the cellar door, but toward the antique grandfather clock near the entrance hall. I slammed my shoulder into its tall wooden casing. It rocked violently, protesting its sudden movement, and then crashed to the polished floor, sending gears, weights, and splintered wood flying in a chaotic diversion. Michael roared in frustration, momentarily blinded by the debris. He lunged toward the fallen glove, reaching for the tag. I didn't run for the front door. Instead, I scrambled up the first 3 steps of the cellar stairs, ignoring the oppressive chill radiating up from the darkness. I snatched the heavy, ornamental brass key from Michael's suddenly empty hand as he scrambled back up from the floor. Michael looked up, his face a mask of pure hatred, realizing I'd manipulated him into leaving the key accessible. "You fool! You don't know what you're doing!" he shrieked. I reached the landing. Below me, I could hear the heavy, resonant thunk of the main containment door, the one Michael had likely tried to open first, slamming shut, followed by the distinct sound of multiple heavy bolts sliding into place from the inside. I looked down at the brass key in my hand, then at the metallic tag lying harmlessly on the rug near Michael's feet. Dad hadn't wanted me to use the tag. He wanted me to have the real key. Then, from the absolute darkness beneath the staircase, a sound echoed up. It wasn't a moan or a cry for help. It was a deep, guttural scrape, like stone grinding against metal, followed by a slow, heavy inhalation that sounded far too large for a human lung. The air suddenly smelled intensely of ozone and something anciently metallic. Michael froze halfway up the fallen clock. He looked at the cellar door, then at me, his face draining of all color. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice cracking with genuine terror for the first time. "That's not Dad. That's what he made." The scraping sound came again, louder this time, directly beneath my feet, accompanied by a wet, splintering crack against the reinforced wood of the door frame. The air pressure in the hallway dropped, and the light fixture above us flickered violently as whatever was down there began to actively test its bonds.